All right. 4:31, I'd like to call the meeting of the Whitman Middle School Building Committee to order. As always, this is being recorded for broadcast at a later date. So everyone's aware of that on WHCA TV. If you please join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I know this isn't on the agenda, but in light of the tragedy that occurred last week in Texas, if we could just have a moment of silence to consider all those implications. Thank you.
Hi, John.
Okay, has everyone had an opportunity to read the meeting minutes?
Okay.
I would entertain a motion to approve the
So moved.
minutes that were distributed. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Recap of the MSBA kickoff informational meeting. On Friday, MSBA had invited initially some of us, and eventually it was considered to be for all of us, a informational meeting that covers the timelines that you'll see that AI3 is prepared. It was a good meeting. I thought it was a little bit repetitive as far as some of the information that we already had, but it seemed to work well. I don't know if you want to give any other type of a summary from Collier's point of view?
No, I think good meeting, and I don't have anything to add unless the architect has anything they want to contribute.
No, it was, sorry, I got a tickle in my throat.
Okay. All right. And Collier's OPM report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be brief, and then we'll go to the meat of the agenda. So, the big news, obviously, is we have the contract with the architect executed, and we're right on target, having done that by the 18th, so that's good news. If you will refer to the OPM report, the first page that was emailed to you, I'll just point you to the top right-hand corner. Our total project budget, as we know, is $850,000. We're now showing, as of this reporting period, the encumbered amount of the project of $632,590. That's the architect's contract amount. And then when you add on the OPM fee of $179,977, our total encumbered to date is $812,567. So, as part of the OPM report, we do track the invoices to date. That total now is $28,927. And if you go down to the OPM section just below the top there, you'll see that invoices paid to date is $18,657. And then what's been received this reporting period, which would be the April invoice from Collier's, is $10,270. So, activities for the OPM this past reporting period, that's contract negotiations, coordination with the architect, owner, financial updates, building committee attendance, and the various MSBA meetings that we've been attending and facilitating. We like to talk about schedule as part of the OPM report, but I think that our architect's going to do a pretty deep dive as part of their presentation, so I'm going to defer to them on that tonight. So without further ado, unless there's any questions, we can move on. That's the end of the OPM report.
I don't know if we want to take this out of order where we're discussing this and that the project is on budget, but I would entertain a motion to approve invoices received to date, and I believe the only one that we have in this is the OPM for the $10,270, is it?
Yep.
So I entertain that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Okay, so that part of the handiwork is done. And at that, Troy? And please introduce yourself, because I don't know if everyone here knows you, and how does it feel to be back in this building?
That feels fantastic.
Especially compared to where we came from originally, which was the old high school,
Right?
and the portables in that back room.
Yeah,
That was 95 degrees in the middle of winter.
And ironically, I was going through back at that point the presentation material and all the existing conditions and some of the documentation with the MSBA just recently. It's wild to think that 20 years ago that this was constructed. It's pretty amazing. But anyway, it's enough reminiscing of many years. So my name is Troy Randall, a partner at AI3 Architects, and with me is project architect, senior associate Julie Rahilly, and I am excited to be back in Whitman Hanson, so thank you all very much. We're going to give you a little bit of a snapshot of the big picture, what to expect over the next year and a half. And we'll take and go over the topics fairly high level, but if there's anything at all that you want to dive a little bit deeper in more detail about, feel free to stop us and we can go through in greater detail. So we'll give a little bit of the project schedule. We'll talk about milestones in the upcoming phases for PDP, which is Preferred Design Program, Preliminary Design Program, and then PSR, Preferred Schematic Report. And so, if you don't know who we are, since being here in the high school Whitman Hanson Regional, we've done projects across the Commonwealth, over 35 citizen towns, worked with and collaborated with, developed over 50 schools, renovation, additions, new construction, public, private, K through 12, and we've also partnered with the MSBA for that long, including the former SBA, School Building Assistants. We've been designers, capacity designers, consultants with the MSBA, and most recently, Julie participated in demystifying Net Zero, which was a program that the MSBA put together talking about zero net energy, and Julie spoke as a panelist on that day-long discussion about the Watertown schools, the two elementary schools, net zero energy schools. So a lot of experience here in Massachusetts and New England. One of the things that this is a slide from the interview presentation, and it's a pretty benign slide overall, but it hits on three major topics that we talked about during the interview, and that was, one is community engagement. Make sure that the community is involved in the process from the beginning until the end. And we really, if you chat with any of our past and current clients, they'll tell you that we mean that. We engage the community in various ways, whether that's through TV, radio, social media, community forums, virtual, in-person. And so that's important here, and I know it's important to you guys as part of the process. The second is budget and cost control. Probably, you know, well, one of the top three components, but extremely important in the process, and we'll be talking about that in this discussion as well as moving forward throughout the entire process. In the third, and certainly not the last, is student-centered design. We talked a lot about how it's important to not only design the building for the students, but include them in the process. And so that will be a topic that we also talked a lot about during the initial stages. Yeah.
Not to get too off track, but I want to go back to community engagement for 1 second. I feel it's very important that all members of this committee that we're getting the same consistent message as to what the project is, where we're at, what our statuses are, etc. If you gave us, brief talking points here and there, so that we, as we're out in public, we can make sure that it's one consistent message, not one person saying one thing, someone saying another thing, and like a guy telling me the other night, oh, the new school, it's going down there in the corner, what are you going to do with that baseball field? Like, huh? So, that'd be
Yes, for sure. We will definitely, any way the committee needs our assistance in refining that, it will be part of the process, and community forums and community outreach is something that it's important, to your point, distill all of the information into very important sound bites that's digestible by the layperson that isn't maybe familiar with the process or as familiar with the project overall. So yes, for sure.
Mr. Scriven?
Yeah, kind of on that point, Fred. At some point, I'm sure we'll be talking about different avenues to get the word out to the public.
Absolutely.
I'd like to add that one of the best ways to do that, I think, in reaching a large segment of the population would be through the schools, the email addresses and things like that. So just we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Email addresses, there's voter registration lists that we can, capitalize on. There are many, many different ways that we can reach out. And I know you guys will be out in the community as well with us. And, trying to get, probably as we get more steps in, getting the community, getting people here. Maybe even taking it on the road, having a meeting over at Conley, having a meeting over at Duval, having a meeting at the middle school, and invite the parents and the kids even. Hey, it's going to be a quick 15 minutes on what we're looking to do, and once we have a better vision, so to speak, because at this point, we just don't know. We're in feasibility.
Right. I was just thinking it might not be a bad idea to start rather earlier than later, just to get kind of the momentum going. You know what I mean? So if we just use our different ways of distributing, information and just get heads up on meeting times, agendas, things like that. Past what we talked about in the past. I don't think it's too early to start that.
Sure.
Yeah, and you'll see in a few more slides we're proposing to get out there. To your point, sooner rather than later. Yeah, you bet. So I won't go through this in detail, but this is just a recap of how we got to this point, or how you got to this point with the initial designer RFS advertisement, and then up to the point where that John was referring to earlier with the MSBA and the district kickoff meeting that occurred on Friday. I'm going to ask Julie to talk a little bit about, when we first were notified of the selection, we certainly didn't sit around and wait for a contract. We didn't wait for anything. That's not really how we operate. We hit the ground running as fast as possible, knowing that the process takes an incredible amount of work. And so Julie will go through a bunch of things that we have already been active on.
Yeah, and it's nice to finally be here in person. I've already sort of spammed a bunch of you in emails, probably John especially, and as Troy said, we've been going ever since the interview, and so some of those things that we've been up to, we've put together our initial work plan, which we'll be going over tonight. We've also been coordinating with our consultants behind the scenes, so we have dates set up for when they'll be beginning their existing conditions assessments that Troy and I will also be executing from an architectural standpoint. And that'll just be assessing the existing conditions, and ultimately they'll put together reports for us that will be included in the PDP report. altogether. We've had the wetlands delineation done last week, and what that is just sort of verifying if the boundaries of the wetlands match what's been previously surveyed, and the school, the middle school, is indeed surrounded by wetlands, so that will be something to consider when we get more into design. We've also been coordinating with our educational programmer, Manuel Cordero, for the agendas of these upcoming visioning sessions, and we have an initial kickoff meeting tomorrow, actually, with core leadership to sort of start that process. We've also put together our PDP report template, so we're starting to get an idea of everything that we need to include in that report as we get closer to October, and similarly a table of contents so that we can give the building committee an update with every meeting as to where we are in that process. And then something that we were able to do last week is visit with all of the elementary school principals and just see the two elementary schools, walk through them, get to know the elementary school principals, and just get a sense of what's the culture of the elementary age group here in Whitman. Is there overcrowding? What are sort of some initial takes on maybe 5th grade moving up? Nothing set in stone, but just sort of becoming familiar with those schools and the feeder schools to Whitman Middle School. And then with that information, we've been able to put together these 3D models of each school, and those are helpful just because we can catalog all of the spaces, their areas, and ultimately those will inform our space summary analysis, which is another component of the PDP report.
I would say just expanding on that a bit, with as you all know, part of the discussion will be through the, as required by the MSBA and the contract with feasibility study with the district, is looking at the 5 through 8 option and looking at the 6 through 8 option. So we know from working with 15 to 20 other districts related to the same concept and the same evaluation that we need to get on the into the elementary schools and look at the spaces, identify what's the square footage for the individual spaces, the classrooms, and the auxiliary spaces, identify what the current capacity is, and that will be one piece of the bigger picture and the equation of what, as a collective group, what the evaluation is for 5-8 to 6-8. There's no, and I just want to make it very clear, there's no conclusion, we're not jumping to any conclusions. It's been different for each district, but we know the pieces of the puzzle that we need to evaluate with you to come to a conclusion as a district, as a community for 5-8 and 6-8. So this is just one small piece of the puzzle. We knew we could get it in motion, and at the next meeting or the future meeting, we'll talk about what those findings were as far as the elementary schools and the spaces as it relates to the K through 5 or K through 4, how that compares to the MSBA space summary templates, and how that works into a bigger picture discussion on 5 through 8, 6 through 8.
And all of that is just this part of this continued accumulation of information that Troy and I are gathering. And so that was some research and interviews, and we'll bring that back to our office, and it will all just inform the report as we get closer.
Yep.
And also, we have to evaluate whether or not we're building a new school, whether we're renovating with an addition. I mean, all those items, it's so premature, are still on the table.
Yep, exactly. Which hasn't even begun at this point, but yes, correct. And so, excuse me, what you see here is, this is the first delineation of the feasibility study and schematic design schedule and the steps involved to get to the end game, which is next year, 2023, the fall of next year, is to have a schematic design set of documents complete for submission to the MSBA. The first step in the process is where we are now. So feasibility study and schematic design. Feasibility study is broken out into two parts. The first is the preliminary design program, and the second is preferred schematic. So you can see that, and this is coordinated partially with the MSBA schedule, meeting date schedule. And the reason why I say partially is because the year 2023 hasn't been published yet. So that's something that will evolve, will start to refine when we get more information, Colliers after he gets more information from the MSBA related to the 2023 schedule of submission dates, FAS meetings, Facilities Assessment Subcommittee meetings, Board of Directors meetings, and their entire annual schedule. So, but as of right now, we know that the PDP, the Preliminary Design Program, will be submitted to the MSBA on October 21st. That is setting up for a Board of Directors meeting on March 2nd of 2023. Sorry, that's in March. No, I'm sorry, December. October to December, it's actually December 18th, I believe, that for the MSBA Board of Directors meeting. And so they have a very specific timeline for submission, their review, and also the Board of Directors approval to move forward to the next phase. And so that's what we're setting up at this point. That works really well with the sequence of investigations through the summer, the discussions related to educational visioning, educational planning, and hits that date so that we can keep moving through step 2, which is the preferred schematic report, which would also go to the March 2nd date of 2023. And that, as I mentioned, is just an assumption at this point based on their current schedule of 2022. Then at that point, the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee meeting as well as the Board of Directors approval would occur, and then we'd move through schematic design, submitting schematic design on August 31st of next year, or somewhere in that range of a date as we coordinate with the MSBA. Step 3 concludes with in August in anticipation of approval by the Board of Directors and also local approval and local funding. And then phase 2, we won't get into any detail there, but phase 2 essentially is the next year, 2023, with the various components of design development, 60% CDs, 90% CDs, and 100% construction documents. Any questions on overall? This is consistent, by the way, with the designer services schedule that was identified in that document. So there's no deviation from that document, significant deviation. Obviously, we're coordinating exact dates, but that gives you sort of the big picture of schedule. Any questions on that? No? Okay. So to package those 3 components, feasibility study and schematic design, and as you may recall, feasibility study is preliminary design program and preferred schematic report, and then schematic design stands on its own. This gives you an idea of the bigger picture pieces of the puzzle that are included within each of those reports to the MSBA. And so PDP, Preliminary Design Program, includes essentially 3 components. One is the educational visioning, the educational program, and the existing conditions evaluation. And so you'll see there are more components to that, but generally speaking, that's what we're talking about. It's the investigative portion of the work. It is a lot of information that we are collecting, and that is going to set up what you see at the bottom of the October 21st PDP bubbles is that the evaluation of alternative options. Now, that is not looking at detailed drawings of options. That is very high level. We haven't even got to options yet, except for the fact that the MSBA requires a base repair, a 5/8 new construction, 5/8 ad reno, 6/8 new construction, and 6/8 ad reno. So essentially you'll have 5 high-level options of what this PDP will include. We will get to the point where the programming process, the educational programming and visioning, identifies and populates a space summary. So the space summary is an MSBA template that is populated with existing conditions, with new construction or proposed square footages, and it will ultimately identify what the approximate square footage, gross square footage, is for an ad reno and a new construction for both 5/8 and 6/8. And so that will allow the professional team to identify very high level costs for each particular option. And it's a range, it's not a specific cost. It's a high level range based on square footage and based on the type of project that we're talking about. So that's as detailed as we'll get as far as anything that's related to a proposed project. And that's going to occur at the end of this year, the fall of this year. And then we'll transition into preferred schematic. There won't be any decisions made, by the way, related to that as we transition to preferred schematic. During preferred schematic, we'll evaluate even further the program, the space summary. And then we'll also get into much more detail about the individual projects, meaning the individual options. We'll dive into more detail what those potential options look like. And eventually, you may have 5 to 20 different options that ultimately you'll start to navigate and to decide which is the project that we're moving forward with. And that is specific. That is it a 5/8? Is it a 6/8? Is it a new construction? Is it ad reno? And with that, you will also know much more detail about the project itself, about the specific project, its location on a proposed site, its renovation and additions, if that's the case, or what sort of the potential form of the building is from a massing standpoint. Then the collective team will also, meaning Colliers and AI3, our estimators will estimate the various options, and at the end of preferred schematic, one option will be selected by the committee. And so at that point in time, the documentation that's submitted to the MSBA will ultimately identify, and we'll have a vote on which option the committee will move forward into schematic design and develop as a single option from March of next year all the way through the end of August. And as that project is developed, as you can see in the bullet points on the far right-hand column, we'll be looking at the final design program, tweaking the square footages, tweaking the overall gross square footage of the project, of the proposed project, and looking at the site in more detail, looking at the exterior design and what it looks like aesthetically, developing schematic drawings and documents for the MSBA, and then, like I said, with the other PDP and PSR, putting together cost estimates for the option. The cost estimate that's developed at that point in time, the reconciled cost estimate between Colliers and also the design team, is going to be the value that you use for approval by the district, approval by the community for approval of the project to move into phase 2. So that's a lot of information, and if there's any questions related to that, you can certainly dive a little bit deeper into anything there. No? Okay. Yeah.
Just, when do we, would be a good time for us to start touring some other schools?
That is, we are, and thank you for bringing that up, because we are reaching out to at least 3 districts that we have completed recently, and to set up tours, and we want to coordinate, we'll coordinate through John and Ken, the group, and times and dates that we can go see some projects. But yes, for sure. And I would say, as soon as we possibly can, before everybody leaves for the summer, and before we get too far into the visioning and the educational programming process. So, giving perspective, that's probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks, is to try to get a group to visit projects, if that works with schedule. We can refine the schedule, but if that just conceptually works, then we'll set that up.
Great. I know the week of June 20th, that's when we get out, correct?
23rd.
And I know I'm out of state that whole week, but
What are the districts that you do? Locals?
So
Local?
Kennedy, yeah, and Natick.
Yep.
So Kennedy and Natick. We could go to Beverly, Beverly Middle School, and we go to in Quincy, Southwest Middle School as well. Those are 3 that were recently completed. Yeah.
anything innovative in either of those? I know that's how we came up with our catwalk.
There's a lot of innovation, and I'm not just. There are a lot of things that would be really good to see, and I think it's important to go to those buildings, talk with the administrators, and talk with the facilities as well, to not only see what's fantastic about the building, the design, the concept, and the innovative middle school aspects, but what would they do differently? How would they approach certain aspects of it, of the project or the process, or what would they do differently? It's always good. We always love to hear both aspects of.
And these are schools that you worked on?
Oh yeah.
Also be a little bit curious as to the cost estimating and where the final budget came in.
Yeah, all were within budget and on time. In fact, we may, as I'm thinking about it, even though it's an elementary school, Hosmer Elementary School is a K-5, and it's a zero net energy building we just completed in Watertown that is about the same size, or in that range of size, that a renovated or new middle school would be here. So that may be a good project also to take a look at.
At the committee's will, I think that might be something very interesting to look at how you're able to attain net zero.
Yep.
And what the cost was, what the payback is. Obviously we're cost sensitive as we were when we built this building.
Yeah.
But you guys
as this building, remember, is the first green school in Massachusetts under the Massachusetts Technology Collaborative.
LEED certified.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions?
I would just add too that all of those schools, they're AI-free schools, but they have such different personalities and they're different sizes, and so the model school building program is no longer something that's being followed, and so it is important to, beyond that educational program aspect, think, what are we representing our community with in these schools too?
Okay. So I'm going to ask Julie to go through You should have this sheet, hopefully you can see it in your document, at least the digital format that you sent earlier. That would Julie go through sort of high level, the next few slides on each phase.
Yeah, and these just break down the previous slide that Troy went through a little bit with more info. And like Troy said, I won't go through each line item, but it's sort of building off of that behind the scenes. What have we been doing and what have we started? And so looking at each of those categories, like the educational program and visioning, is something that is really going to inform this document that we're putting together. And having the proximity of the end of the school year both helps us and challenges us a little bit, because we know we want to be able to talk to those focus groups and stakeholders and educators before the summer ends. But when school is out, that also is a perfect opportunity for us and our consultants to then be able to go in and out of the school as much as we need in order to assess those existing conditions. That will also help to inform, is it an ad reno concept or a new concept? And so some of the things that we've already completed is that wetlands delineation that I mentioned. We're just waiting for a completed report to come through that will ultimately be put into our overall report, and then our architectural walkthroughs with those principals within the district. So those are a couple things out of this exhaustive list that we've already completed.
Quick question, is it possible, or would it be inappropriate to receive summary reports as you receive them to be reported out to the committee? So in other words, there's been 2 items that have been semi-completed, you're waiting on finalization. So perhaps at our next meeting, we could just get summaries? I don't know if
Yeah.
the committee be,
Yeah, we'll coordinate that between architect and OPM and we'll distribute. Yep.
that'd be
makes
great,
sense.
thank
Yep.
you.
Sure, yeah, and we don't want to bog down the process by sort of, if we end up oversharing, you can let us know that too, but we definitely want to keep the committee informed.
I don't think with this committee you can
Oh,
overshare.
perfect. Yeah, and we try to relay all the information as easy to absorb as possible, because we know it is a lot. So at least in a graphic form too, we'll definitely just check things off and provide dates of anything that we know is coming up.
That'd be great.
And so this month, we're moving into June this month, will be a lot of that existing conditions assessments, the chunk of that information, the visioning, and then looking to use the summer to compile a lot of that information, as well as continued conversations with administration and really fine-tuning what it is that the Whitman Middle School will become educationally. And then we've also outlined some proposed dates on this slide, just trying to follow the school building committee meetings, which we know are Tuesdays on, I think, a monthly basis, bi-monthly basis. That'll be something that
We have been scheduling them every other week. If that's too often for you and there's no real substantive information, we can stretch it out to every third. We want to be, and speaking for myself, but I believe for the committee, as informed as possible as to every step and everything that's occurring without necessarily being overboard or burdensome, to you folks at the same time saying, okay, so we sharpened a pencil, let's have a report on that.
We typically find a monthly schedule to work for us, but there might be some times where, just based on the schedule, it would make sense to meet more, like, throw in another a meeting or two. But and I don't know if you agree with that, but typically you folks find that monthly works for you. But it's up to the committee at the end of the day. So
Input from the committee?
I think monthly's fine, unless they need us quicker.
yeah,
I agree. Okay, so monthly, I guess it is, but obviously if you need us quicker or, there's something that we need to share,
right.
then we can do so.
And along that same line of thinking, we'll also probably want to hold a couple community forums throughout this first step in the process. And so again, the summer challenges us a little bit with that, just looking for proper turnout to get something out of that, but maybe that happens in July and then another one in September or something along those lines. So those are a couple of dates that we're hoping to kind of nail down within the next month or so.
Would we be pushing to try and do something before school gets out on
Yeah.
the 23rd of June?
Yeah,
I think it would be, yeah, I think it would be pushing, because we wouldn't have all the collected data on the existing school, as well as the visioning session, educational visioning sessions, developed or concluded enough to provide an update. And we think we had identified July. We have a specific date, but that's without coordination with anybody. But we think July is a good first step, at least to get something out there on existing conditions, educational visioning, and then it can be recorded or it could be uploaded so that.
Gonna throw a curveball at you.
Okay.
Ms. Byers happens to be in the audience, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you are hosting a June Day through the Cultural Council, or Whitman Day, I should say. The date is June 4th? 25th. Okay. So it's later than I thought. Perfect. If we could have a handout, just an informational handout,
Yep.
that, Dawn, if you folks would be willing, we'll have a bunch made up and presented, so that they can be placed on a table even, for the public to be able to get a copy of.
Sure. Thanks, Fred. I love that idea. I'm Dawn Byers, school committee member of Whitman-Hanson Regional School District, but not on the building committee. What Mr. Small is referring to is I'm also a volunteer on the Cultural Council. We're hosting Whitman Day on that Saturday, and Mr. Dupre, the principal at Whitman Middle School, and some of our other schools are having informational tables to share with the community. So I think if there's some sort of informational handout, that would be excellent to share and get out there. Thanks, Fred.
So between myself and Jeff, we can coordinate that over to Dawn.
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah.
We can put a pamphlet, 8.5 by 11, 3, whatever
Yeah.
we can
Maybe
develop.
even if it has a date of an upcoming community forum, then that would be a good way to get that, information out. Not only just, we're thinking about a proposed renovation, addition, or new school, but upcoming dates when people can participate would be great.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
That could work. There's a way of being able to reach out to mass without, having to knock on everybody's door, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you want to reference I'm just a little hesitant on a July, because so many people are away, but a September, I think that's a fantastic thing. And even pamphlets and whatnot that we can bring to soccer games and baseball games and things of that nature. I know I carry a bunch, and I know I end up giving out a bunch, so.
Yeah, September we'll have a lot of information.
Okay. So maybe we reference that we're going to be holding a community forum in September.
Sure.
At a site and date to be determined, or something of that nature, unless we have that already. That'd be awesome.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and it's certainly striking a balance between what information we have already and without it seeming like we've moved too far ahead without community input, but also kind of bringing enough to the table that it makes it worthwhile. So yeah, and then as Troy mentioned earlier, just getting to that point where the building committee can sort of decide on these preliminary options and alternatives to take us into that October MSBA submission for this report. And then for step 2, that preferred schematic report that we would be putting together. This is also a breakdown of more detail of each of those steps, but we'll have to reassess when we get closer to that October date to sort of hash out what specifically will land at what time, knowing that we are working towards a March 2nd submission for that preferred schematic. And so a lot of the work that goes into that, as Troy mentioned, is just taking that preferred option or those preliminary alternatives and then making it a little more real with every pass-through. And so what is being refined to really be a strong idea that we can push into schematic design and continue to develop and bring to the community.
Ultimately, at this point, with this particular phase, there will be a matrix that is put together with a lot of key points. As we move through with you, the two phases of the feasibility study, there will be key points or goals that are identified that will help guide and help you navigate and guide you in the process for identifying what that particular option is that you'll move forward into schematic design. And so there'll be a matrix that's put together with the option, with all the details related to its square footage, with its cost, with its integrated educational vision, square footage, with as far as individual program pieces, and does it check all the boxes for the community and for the district related to a specific option. And the goal is obviously to make sure that the options, there are a series of options that hit all of the goals, that hit all the facts, that will ultimately be a deciding factor in the single option moving forward. So a lot more to come on that regard, but that will be the ultimate goal for single selection.
In the overview, it said March of '23, looking at for a vote on the grade configuration, etc. But I see that there's a school committee vote for grade configuration for December, and then a building committee vote for the preferred option in January. Is that perhaps backwards and the wrong dates? This is in your big step two there, your red box.
So,
Oh, I see. Yeah, and those would be dates that we would definitely want to narrow in on what is it the building committee is seeking as a preferred option, so that we have time to implement it for that submission in March. So
Okay, so we're not voting in March, we're voting
beforehand, yeah.
before that.
Yeah.
Okay, and school committee before building committee? Or shouldn't the building committee be making a recommendation to the school committee?
typically, in past experience, the school committee would make the vote and recommend the vote to the building committee, just because of grade configuration and you as an entity are controlling and organizing the project, but the school committee has input on the structure. That's how we have seen it in the past, on the educational structure. And so they would vote and then recommend to the building committee for approval. Obviously not without input from the building committee in the process, but just from an organizational and approval standpoint, it would be the school committee.
So they would be recommending to the building committee, and the building committee would be making the
Right.
final vote
That's
to
right.
go to MSBA.
That's right.
Gotcha.
Good questions. It's sort of like if you picture a bullseye, we are in that outermost ring right now, and we're really just trying to get closer and closer to the center with this entire process, being the center being what is this option that we're going to move forward with. And then once we have that report submitted in March, we celebrate because we don't have any more reports to submit to the MSBA, but we're able to move on to the actual architecture for a bit and really begin that schematic design process, which does involve putting construction documents together in a preliminary diagrammatic stage, but makes it a little bit more real. We know sort of we have an idea of the systems that we're using and maybe the structural grid, and so some of those things that situate the building on the site and make it getting closer to real, getting closer to that middle of the bullseye. And so we'll be working through that. Additionally, the building will sort of start to have an aesthetic by then a little bit, or at least we can talk about the details more. And all of that will help sort of sell the community perhaps on what it is that, again, what's that center of the bullseye option that we're all trying to work toward. And so that would ultimately conclude in the end of August with a schematic design document set. So documents that are of a more constructible nature than just these reports.
And just to that point, when the PDP document will be 1,000 to 1,400 pages of reports. So it's all gathering information, and then you get to PSR, it has probably 700 to 800 pages of information with drawings, very big picture, schematic, or I wouldn't even say schematic, very conceptual in nature drawings, and then you get to schematic design. It's a larger set of drawings and a smaller report of 100 plus pages. So it starts to morph into an actual project through the process.
And then following that submission in August, the MSBA will meet in, we're projecting October 25th of 2023, and we'll know if we can sort of move forward with the funding process, or at least soliciting for the funding process.
Yeah. So
We're looking at a special town meeting and then an election to determine what we do. Anybody have any questions?
I have a specific question. You had already completed the wetlands delineation, and I know at the last meeting, there was discussion about some alternate property or adjacent property that was just donated to the town. When you performed the wetlands evaluation, did you also evaluate that property as well, or did you just stay on the current property that school owns?
So the wetland delineation is in specific zones on the property itself. Another piece of that is the site survey. And so the simultaneous, as Julie mentioned earlier, in the summer, when school is out, the site survey will be conducted, identifying the boundaries of the site and some detail within the actual site proper. And if there are parcels outside of that, if we could just know what those parcels are that need to be included within the survey, that would be really helpful because we can do it now versus later. Yeah. Does that?
It didn't really, but just the fact that you don't really know what I'm talking about sounds like you did not use in John's shaking his head.
No. So I do know.
I can maybe clarify this a little bit better. The property that was donated in February at the town meeting, the Board of Selectmen, the town owns that property. The Board of Selectmen has not deemed it to be used for our project.
Well, it hasn't yet, yeah.
And there still remains a few items as far as the lease goes, etc. Before I think they can make a decision.
I kind of just wanted to make sure we weren't including that property yet because
we're not as of yet.
Not ours to use yet.
It's
even
premature.
Though it's exciting and the opportunity is there. I mean, I think I even sent something
Right,
to
we can.
both of you guys earlier on
And
it.
it's on, if I could, it's on the left-hand, like, if you're on the driveway heading out to the fire lane, right?
Behind the baseball field, it's like kitty corner to the baseball field.
Right, but it's higher or is it in the field?
It's
two pieces.
It's basically behind all of the of Hog Memorial.
Yeah.
It goes right along Hog Memorial, almost all the way to Auburn Street. So it doesn't back up to the property. It's corners
Right, back.
and it goes along the way. So it's basically behind. It's basically, if you look at any of the Hog Memorial initial drawings from 1960, they were going to build roads there. And they probably found it too wet. And when Egan went in there, he found it too wet to build houses there. So he ended up not using it. I mean, Bob would know more than me about it. But I know there was discussion at the last meeting about having you guys go in there. And I just wanted to make sure it didn't happen because it's not our team.
Premature.
Okay. As soon as we know,
Thank you.
We'll
It'll
make sure you
definitely
folks
pass
know,
that
and
on.
that way there, it can be counted and not counted.
Sounds good.
Well, it's not counted, it's not counted. Yeah. Did we have someone?
If I could.
Sure.
My name's Stephanie Blackman. I'm a Whitman resident, grew up in Hanson, but I'm the vice president of Whitman Hanson Youth Soccer. And I just wanted to kind of check in and see, I know that you guys are doing things as far as planning of fields, because we do have the baseball fields there, the soccer fields are there, lacrosse uses those fields. So I just was kind of curious as to, how that's being incorporated. But more than that, the fields are absolutely atrocious. If anybody's been down there, they're really solid packed dirt instead of fields. Whitman Hanson Youth Soccer has a chunk of money, and we'd like to actually invest it in redoing the front field at this point in time, but I don't want us to waste money if we're going to have a problem with that.
Until everything is determined exactly what we're doing and where things are going, I would say to hold on to your money. But I do know at least, and I'm speaking only for myself, we will never take away any field or any footage that is being used recreationally for our kids, whether that be baseball, softball, soccer, lacrosse, etc. Now, things may get put in a different place when we're all said and done, but we will never, ever have less footage than what we have now. Our kids use everything that's up there.
Okay, so the recommendation from Advanced Lawn Service was that we actually install irrigation in the front field and tear it up and put sod down, which
I wouldn't.
where, pardon
I
me?
wouldn't if I were you.
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't spend $40,000
No, I would wait.
Not
It
yet.
sounds like our timeline would maybe be around March when we have a better idea on what we're gonna do. I mean, at that point, whether we're gonna build a new school or do an add and add on to the current school, but, to me, I mean, it seems like it wouldn't, I know what happened up here, and the fields were gone for 2 years, and it was even a year after the school was done before we could use the fields out, baseball fields up front. So, I would hold off on doing anything because like that field may be in a different location. Their plans were different, but until we know what their plans are,
It's a bit early in the process.
too early to tell.
No, I understand. Like I said, the fields are terrible at this
Well,
point in
hopefully when
time.
we're all done, the fields will be amazing.
I'm sure they will.
Now,
However,
the
most of
back
the kids who are
ones?
playing, the back ones are bad, but the front one,
The ones
that
the
front
National
field,
Guard redid, those are bad?
yeah, there's just patches of solid dirt. There's no loam, very bare grass. It's not very safe area.
Yeah.
So our goal was to take the front field, which I thought was the least likely to be intruded upon, and try to renovate that so that we'd actually have decent grass for the kids to play on. But I appreciate the input, and I guess we'll continue to save our pennies and hopefully not end up with any more broken ankles. We've had a few injuries as a result of it's not even level. So yeah, we're just trying to figure out what we can do to
And
improve.
by all means, we want the kids to be safe, but just
And the
hate to see-
coaches to keep breaking their ankles, I'm telling you. So, all right, well, we'll continue to talk to Ernie and other folks in the school and see what we can do, but thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you.
If I may, I'm sure I would just say it's a really good sort of segue into when we talk about the community forums and we talk about the stakeholders for the project that, like yourself or any other groups that are using the field, are participating in the process, it would be really helpful for us to know and have them involved in the discussion so that the entire site, the entire development is as inclusive as possible. And so that's a really good.
Would you want to see that meeting occur sooner rather than later, perhaps?
No, we're not even close to.
Okay,
not
because
right
when
now.
we do that, let's do it at the middle school and make sure that we
Yeah.
invite everybody.
Yep, absolutely.
So that way that everyone can have their input.
And can I have a question?
Sure.
So when we have these community forums and things, no matter the time of year, wouldn't we do them at the Whitman Middle School?
Pardon?
Is our intention to have all of these community forums and things like that at the Whitman Middle School?
If we're reaching out to elementary school parents, it might make sense to have it at the elementary school where they're at. It does make sense at the Whitman Middle as well, but, you know, whatever's gonna be
I just think
easiest
that
and
that's
more, the most comfortable for the parents too.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with you on that, because I think it should be where the students that go to school for 7 hours a day, their parents should be able to see what it looks like also.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're having a community forum in July, that should be at the cafeteria, because there is no anything else.
conditioning,
Like I said,
they
I
should
wouldn't say, there is no anything else there. So, I mean, I just think that's something that we need to consider.
No, I agree as far as in,
Yeah.
July or, our first forum, but if we're trying to reach the elementary school parents, perhaps at the elementary school is a more comfortable place for some of those.
What you're saying is it sort of helps describe the needs by
Yeah.
showing it in person. Right?
I mean, the elementary parents are the ones that are gonna be the ones that are gonna push this vote through.
Mhm.
So we want them to see the school.
Yeah.
They don't see that school.
Right.
So I agree with George.
If they come here, it's a different environment.
Those are the parents that are gonna come out to vote, and we can get them out to vote.
Yeah.
The middle school kids are gonna be gone. So they're gonna say, oh, my kid's at the high school now, I don't care.
Yeah,
But
Yes.
Seems like there's plenty of time to do both, right? I agree, to get the involvement, most involvement from the elementary schools. We might want to do a forum of some type at their schools, but I agree with George that maybe initially we meet at the middle school. And, in terms of the number of these events, how many do you, range? What are you thinking?
Usually, they're, in the entire process, 8 to 10.
Yeah,
at
so
least.
there'd be plenty of time to visit the
Or actually, we got something to piggyback, and what if we did something such as, we always have an opening night, so to speak. Where everyone sees their classes, they meet their teachers, et cetera, in the elementary level. What if we have information there where the parents are comfortable, information for our upcoming forum at the middle school?
Yeah, I would think
Something like that.
September, it's on the calendar, we have an academic expectation night, like all the parents go and go from there, that'll be it's great, that's a great input to have something there also.
And I'm sure we'll coordinate that over the next month or so.
Yeah, for sure.
More pamphlets. We'll go from there. Anyone else, questions, thoughts? Complaints? All right. Do you folks have anything else?
That's it, thank you.
Okay. So based upon that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
In favor? Yeah, nobody wants to